Thanks for having me. So yeah, I know the cross country people, and then anybody who went on the Washington D.C. field trip last year. I got to meet and hang out with you also, and then I'm around here fairly often, so it's good to get to meet you. It's really cool to get to come and talk to you, friends, family, and then extended family, really just as the SCCS family. So Dr. Wilson said I retired as a major about 4.5 years ago. Go by a call sign Fingers. So we'll talk about that a little bit. So in the Air Force, we do this call sign thing. And maybe you've seen Top Gun Maverick, and maybe we'll have a couple of clips from Top Gun Maverick in this show. So you can look forward to that. But they all have call signs, but they're really cool call signs. Like nobody's Fingers in Top Gun Maverick. It's Maverick, it's Goose, it's Iceman. It's all these really cool names, but the Air Force doesn't do it that way. It's not quite how we roll. So there's kind of 3 rules for a call sign. So the first one is it can't be too cool. That's just the first rule. So the second rule is that it's got to be based on something that you did that was kind of dumb. So this is kind of like most embarrassing moment type things. People are always on the lookout for things that you do that you really messed up, and then they tell a super embellished story about it, and then they do a naming ceremony and they give you a name. So if you like your name, then that's good, but most people don't, at least at first. But if you fight against it, like that's the surefire way to keep it forever and ever and ever. So you just have to embrace it, love it for what it is. But the last rule is that it either needs to be some kind of an acronym. So in Top Gun Maverick, there was Bob, if you've seen that, and that was baby on board, right? Bob. So we come up with acronyms sometimes, and then the other time is you do something where it's a play on words with the last name. So fingers crossed. Somebody, you embellish some stories. They said that I'd say, hey, good luck, and keep your fingers crossed. And they're like, that's funny, your last name's Cross. And so anyways. But getting a call sign is one thing, but keeping a call sign is a whole nother different thing. So it almost becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you do one thing, and then anything else that you do that somebody can somehow say like, oh, well, of course, Fingers did that. That totally makes sense because of this call sign. So that's kind of how we roll. So I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go too. But I brought some of the gear with me. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time, not a whole lot of show and tell. Maybe we're a little older than that, but it is super cool gear. There's so much technology that's built into this. It just looks like a really weird pair of chaps that you might wear if you were a motorcycle rider or something. But this is the G suit. So right here, this is where it hooks up to the aircraft side, and this is what inserts and takes out air into this. So you wear it just kind of like chaps or like jeans, and you zip it up, and it has to fit super, super tight. So some of the technology, you can go into this portion, and you'll see that there's this really intricate like lacing there. So about once every 2 months, you have to go in and get it resized and refitted because sometimes you eat a little too much Thanksgiving pie, and so they have to let it out a little bit, or you're working out hard, and then they have to tighten it. So they make it really tight. And you wear that because when you're flying fighter jets and you turn, that causes a G-force. So 1 G-force, me standing right here, is 1 times the force of gravity. You figure out what that is when you step on the scale. So I step on the scale, it reads about 220 pounds. That's 1 force of gravity. If I'm turning, and if you saw the Edwards Air Show, they turn at 9 Gs in the F-16 up there. That's 9 times 220. So you're talking about 2,000 pounds, about a ton is what you weigh. So it's kind of like if you sit on your little brother or little sister, like they're experiencing, multiple Gs on top of them. But just think about like stacking up like 8 or 9 of you on top of your sister or brother. And you can see it's really kind of painful. So this is really to keep you alive. You've seen Top Gun Maverick. There's a scene in there, and you see what happens when somebody pulls those high G-forces and doesn't tolerate it. So what that does is when you pull the G-forces, it squeezes your legs, it pushes blood back up into your brain so that you stay alive and you don't die. So that's the first piece of gear. You also have gloves. You won't see anybody in the movies wearing these things because I guess they're not cool. But we have to wear gloves. It's by regulation. This is one of my 2 flying helmets. Again, a lot of technology in here. I won't cover all of it, but you've got your oxygen mask, which gives you different concentrations of oxygen based on the altitude that you're flying and based on the G's that you're pulling. So as you pull more G's, it actually gives you more oxygen. Again, trying to keep you alive because you're about 2,000 pounds heavy and it's really, really hard on the body. You've got your visor here to keep the sun out of your eyes a little bit. There's also some bladders inside that inflate with air also, just like the G suit to try to keep blood up into your brain. So a lot of technology in there. There's microphones, there's hearing protection all built in to this helmet. They didn't let me keep the other helmet because it's like $100,000. But this is the visor that goes with the other helmet. The other helmet is for a helmet-mounted cueing system. So it takes, and this is the visor that goes with it. What it'll do is it'll display over the right eye an image of what's on your heads-up display. So you see targeting, you can cue missiles, radar, and other sensors on the aircraft just by looking at it and then pressing a button on the stick or the throttle. So that's pretty cool. So they take this, they put it on your face, and then they actually grind it down with a Dremel to make it fit perfectly on your cheek so it fits exactly the same place every time. But then when you leave, they can't put it on anybody else because nobody else has a face that's quite like your own, and so they let you keep it. So this is mine. This is, you can see in the picture, this is what I'm wearing in that picture. That's a picture of me on my last flight in the F-16 a little over 10 years ago in 2011. So, all right, with that, that's basic introduction. Let's jump into it. What I want to do is I want to teach you a little bit of something. So hopefully you'll walk away with here with something that you didn't know before, teach you a little bit about being a pilot. I also want to entertain you, so we got some clips from Top Gun Maverick, because what good would it be to have a fighter pilot up here and not show you like the biggest movie on planet ever? So we're going to show some videos, but there's a point, there's kind of something to take away, and we're going to share some scripture and we'll talk about that. Want to share some of my background and talk about why that's important. With that, I'll get my clicker out and then we'll go on. So, Dr. Wilson talked about it's Veterans Day on Friday, which is November 11th. So there's a lot of symbology or symbolism that goes with that. So this goes back, this is the teaching you. So if you're a history nerd like I am, then you're going to be super happy. If you're a math nerd like I also am, I'm kind of a nerd of everything. But if you're any one of those nerds, then you should like this. So 11/11, November 11th. So 11th month, 11th day. And then this was based on the armistice. So it was originally called Armistice Day at the end of World War I. During World War I, they didn't call it World War I, though, because it was just the war. It was the Great War is what they called it. Some people called it the war to end all wars. But as World War I ended, and Germany gave up, and the Axis powers gave up, they declared an armistice. They did that on November 11th at 11:11 a.m. So 11:11 was the date, 11:11 was the time, so it's symbolic. We celebrate Veterans Day today on November 11th. It hasn't always been that way. It's kind of gone all over the place. They called it different things. They started out calling it Armistice Day, and they celebrated just the end of fighting. That changed in 1938. They made it a national holiday, and they said, we're going to celebrate this. This is a national holiday. Congress signed it into law. And then the next year, Germany invaded Poland and kicked off what we now know as World War II, which made it kind of difficult. It's like, hey, we now have this new holiday, and then there was World War II. And then in the 50s, early 50s, there was the Korean War. And then in the 60s and 70s, there was the Vietnam War. And in the wake of that, our elected officials decided we need to change how we do this and how we remember it, because it's not just about the veterans of World War I, it's about the veterans of all wars. So that's how it changed, and they also made a change where it was celebrated on a Monday so we could get a nice 3-day weekend, but we decided that there's way too much symbolism in 11/11, November 11th at 11/11, so that's what we celebrate now. And rather than just the survivors and those who served and died in World War I, it's now out to all veterans. So that's your history lesson today. For those that went on the DC trip, you saw the picture in the upper left-hand corner at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier at Arlington Cemetery. That's where they walk back and forth 24/7, 365, rain, snow, thunderstorms, tornadoes, hurricanes, anything. It doesn't stop. They march back and forth on that black mat. They change out every 30 minutes, and they guard that. But that's not the only Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, and this all goes back to World War I, goes all back to the Armistice Day. And you've got Westminster Abbey in the lower left-hand corner. They've got a tomb for an unknown soldier. And then you've got the Arc de Triomphe on the right in Paris, France, and that also has a tomb for their unknown soldiers. So it's multiple from the Allies in World War I. We all have our monuments that we dedicate, so I wanted to show that, give you a little bit of the history for Veterans Day. All right, next. All right, so shifting gears a little bit, I went to the Air Force Academy. I think later on I'm probably going to come back and do some other informational talks, so I'm not going to talk as much about Air Force Academy today, but this is where something else began for me. This is where I became a Christian. I grew up in the Lutheran church. I went to church with my family. I went through my confirmation and catechism classes. I memorized all the things that I needed to memorize, and I thought I was a Christian. And I got to the Air Force Academy, and I joined this all-guys group, this Bible study. We called ourselves the Fellas. And I came to know the Lord. I got in, we read the entire New Testament, and we studied it really deeply. And I got in and I found out that not everything that I had heard, not everything that I understood. I thought being a Christian was like something I kind of was born into, like my family's Christian, I'm Christian, we're just all Christians because that's what we do. That's kind of the identity. And what I came to learn through this group was more that it's the relationship with Jesus, and it's trusting in Him and having the faith in Him and making Him Lord of my life, not me being the Lord of my life. So that's where it started, and that's what really changed, really, the trajectory of my life, and the other things that we'll talk through here. Go on to the next. All right, so I flew F-16s. You see that in the upper left-hand corner. You also see some pictures of the family as they grew up around me as I flew. So I flew 11 years. 4 years was with the F-16. And then 7 years was flying the MQ-9, the Reaper. They also called those drones. Next. All right. What I do now is I work at Lockheed Martin in Palmdale at the Skunk Works. So you can see the picture up there, some of the airplanes that they're iconic for, the U-2, F-22, SR-71, F-117, and F-35. And then there's a whole bunch of aircraft that we're working on that I can't tell you about. Maybe in 15, 20 years we can talk about it and you'll know about them. Really exciting things. That was a picture of me on my first day at a real adult job. So I took that picture because I wanted to be a little bit like an elementary student with their first day of school picture. So, all right, go to next. All right, and this is the family today. So I already called out Natalie. I already called out Micah. You see them up there. That's a picture from last Christmas on the left, and then us in front of the Dark Star aircraft, which is featured in Top Gun Maverick. So we're going to get into some of the movie clips here soon. But that's us in front of the Maverick at the air show. Go next. All right, so this just short video. So I get a lot of questions, and people say, how do you know what all the switches in the cockpit do? And the answer is you study a lot, and you practice a lot, and you work really hard. It's a lot of work to learn, but still there's a ton of switches there. But there's a story here, and it relates back to my call sign, and this is how you keep a call sign. So go to the next chart. So two switches that I'm specifically going to talk about, which are important for this story that you need to know. So the red arrow points to the anti-collision beacon. So it's a strobe light that's on the top of the tail in the F-16. And as you turn it to different switches, it blinks at different patterns. And then you've got another switch that's the yellow switch. They're both round knobs. They're both about the same shape, and they both turn left and right the same way, like you would expect a round knob to do. There's three different axes in an airplane that we generally talk about. We talk about pitch, which is up and down. We talk about yaw, which is left and right. And we talk about roll, which is the other axis where you roll left and right. The yellow switch there is for the yaw, so that's what points you left, points you right. So with aircraft, as they get 20, 30 years old, and they've got a couple of thousand flight hours on them, and they've been pulling 9Gs several hundred times, they kind of get bent and warped a little bit. They don't quite fly perfectly straight. That's really the only time you ever touch that yaw trim switch, or the only time you're really supposed to touch it. So that's what we'll go into the next slide. So this is what it's like going to Costco or Sam's Club to gas up in the F-16. This is what it looks like. You get about 20 feet away from the aircraft. Aircraft has 150,000 pounds of fuel on board, and you connect. You're really close to it, and it's really something that's pretty busy. So the story is I'm in Iraq. One of my first nights flying over Iraq, and it's at night, so it's a whole heck of a lot darker than that. And it's kind of an unnerving thing. It's kind of it's a really difficult thing, and I wasn't super experienced at it. So I'm there, I'm getting gas, and I connect. The guy comes on the intercom, he says, "Hey sir, could you turn off your anti-collision light?" Go to the next chart. So now you see both of them side by side. So the anti-collision light, so this is over here behind my left hip. And so I'm flying, I got my hand on the stick, I got my other hand on the throttle, and now I have to reach back here while I'm still flying 20 feet away from something that could become a gigantic ball of fire with me connected to it, which is not a really good idea. So I said, oh, absolutely, I totally got this. So I reach back there really quick, I grab the first round knob that I can find, I flip it all the way to the left as fast as I can, and I was pointed that way, and now I'm pointed about this way. Still connected to that thing, that big flying gas tank in the sky. So I quickly hit the disconnect switch, and then I pull the throttle back, and I go several miles aft of the tanker. And in true fighter pilot fashion, you fly out in a formation. So my flight lead sees all of this go on and just gets a really great kick out of it. Goes back and tells the story to all my friends and coworkers. And so somebody's like, you fat-fingered it, and you grabbed the wrong switch. And so that's kind of how I got to keep my call sign. A lot of people, as they move different places, they do something else kind of dumb, and then they get a new call sign. I was fortunate or unfortunate enough to keep my call sign based on some of the antics. All right, we'll go to the next one, some videos. So in that video, there's something kind of shocking that happened. Things didn't go to plan. I had something kind of similar happen to me. I was in Kuwait. I was deployed, and one day I had a seizure. They took me down to Kuwait City Hospital. They did a scan, and that's the scan up on the top. So you got two eyeballs there, and what you're not supposed to have is another mass inside your brain, which is the other big thing larger than the eyeball. So a little bit larger than a golf ball size. It was a tumor in my brain. I came back, they operated on it. That was in May of 2016. And really what the Lord taught me, and what I take away some from the video, some of the things that I really like is you see Maverick get shot. And everybody freaks out because he's the leader. Like, he had a plan, everybody was relying on him, and everybody had a plan. I'm a planner too. I'm super type A. I love to know what I'm doing an hour from now. I love to know what I'm doing 10 hours from now with as much detail as I possibly can get. And this was not in the plan. This was something that really changed things for me. The Air Force said that I couldn't fly anymore, and I never flew again, and I still can't fly today. But I went through the surgery, and really what God's taught me, it's up there is the Proverbs 16:9, and it's we can have plans, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think there's some healthy a healthy balance there to plan and to have hopes and desires, but to also be flexible. And that's what God taught me, is that I need to be flexible, because I can plan my plan, but God's going to establish my steps. God's going to choose, or God has a plan, and that's going to be what actually directs me. And what I need to do is show up and make sure that I walk in His plan, and I'm faithful to that. There's a couple of really disgusting pictures. Me with my doctor. I'm a little taller than he was. You see that up there too. We'll go to the next one. Show a couple more videos.
Standing by for last decision.
Awesome. First off, who gets those cool call signs? Not us. Like payback and such cool call signs. Anyways, so a couple of things. I could unpack things for hours, but you don't want that, and I don't want that. So we'll focus on a couple of things. There's some teamwork that you see there. They're all checking on a radio. They've got 4 that are set up, and there's a plan. There's a specific plan that they're going to go out and execute. It's not something that one person can go do on their own. They need 4. They need all 4. That's why they have a spare in the mission, just because in case something happened, they would call on that. So they check in, they make sure they're ready, they launch, and then they get to a point, and then there's a decision. And it's not just that team. It's not just a team of 4. It's just not the extra one that is there sitting on the ship that is ready to launch as spare, but it's also the rest. It's the missile destroyer that's launching the Tomahawks, and it's also the command that is calling the shots and saying, go ahead and launch them. Let's do the attack. Maverick owns the final mission, and he calls it. Then it goes in, and you see them all synchronize their watch. And that's really where I'm going to focus, is synchronizing the watch. So they know what the plan is. It takes all 4 of them. They know. And not to spoil the rest of the movie, but they've trained a whole lot for this. So they know that they've got a very specific time that they have to meet. They all start their clock at the same time, and then they let everybody know that they've also set their clock. And the people on the boat, you see them, they all hack their clock. They call Mark to make sure that they're all on the same page. There's a couple of scriptures that I'll talk through. I'll unpack the first one a little bit more. It comes out of Hebrews 12. It starts with therefore. So anytime you see a therefore, you got to understand what the therefore is there for. You go back one chapter to the left and you get Hebrews 11, which many people call the Hall of Faith. So you talk about all the Old Testament characters, your Abraham, Moses, Joseph, Jacob, Rahab. The list goes on. There are many that are mentioned. It talks about the faith. And it talks about how that was credited to them as righteousness, but there was still something to come, and that's where we get in. And now it starts talking about Jesus. Now it starts off, now we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. The witnesses are the people on the team with them, and it's also the people in the past from the Old Testament. And the focus, this is where we get singular on our mission, and we make sure that we're all aligned on the same thing. And it's, let's throw off the thing that hinders, let's get rid of the sin, so that we can run with perseverance the race that we have. So whatever the mission is, whatever the plan is, we're going to execute that. And we do that fixing our eyes on Jesus. It also reminds me of the Great Commission out of the end of Matthew, right before Jesus ascended. And he talks about going and making disciples of all the nations. And that is what I see, and that's what I commend to you as being our mission here. And that's the one thing that we should focus on. That's what we should mark our clocks to. That's what we should focus on, and that's going to be my prayer for you. We go to the last chart. I've got one more thing I'll teach you and let you know about on being a pilot. So you've seen the thing in the upper left-hand corner. That's a target. What in the middle of it, does anybody know what that's called? The bullseye, right? So on the right, that's what pilots call a bullseye. And what we use that for is we set a point. So we talk on the radios. Some of the problem of radios is other people, if they know the frequency, they can tune in and they can listen and they can understand what your game plan is. Sometimes it's not good if the opposite team knows what your game plan is. So we use something called a bullseye. So what we do is we set a latitude and longitude coordinate, and that is what our bullseye is. There might have been a time in my career where I was mission planning and I put in the latitude and longitude into our computer system and I input the wrong digit. And so our bullseye was off. So we get airborne, but it was just our force ship. All the other players that we were playing with, they had a different bullseye. So when we start talking about common points, now we're talking about two separate things. And you can see how that could cause just a mountain of confusion. And it did. We were able to figure it out after about 10 minutes of figuring out what was really going on. And again, fat fingers here, messed that one up in the mission planning, and nobody ever let me forget it. But that is what I'm going to leave you on. That's what I'm going to commend to you is focusing on the bullseye. Focus on what is that plan. What is it that God's put in front of you today? And then how do you use the team that surrounds you so that you can focus on that and be on the same page? So find your bullseye and find what you are going to focus on. With that, I want to say thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for your attention. I'll pray real quick, and then we'll turn it over for another song. All right, let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for these students. Thank you for SCCS. Thank you for their attention. Thank you for the word that you give us and for your plans, Lord. Help us to walk in them. Fix our eyes on Jesus as we carry out what you have for us every day. In Jesus' name, amen.